Let me know when you hear and see me. Bow wow wow, yippee yo, yippee yay. Dave Meach in the house today. Oh, good. Thank you, Taylor. All right. It looks like we're on. Welcome, everyone, to today's class. Today's class is going to be on two of David Meach's publications on leadership and how it relates to the professional dog trainer. Um, if this is the first stream that you are watching, this is foundation style dog training, and it is best to learn by learning things in order. We're in the ethology module right now, and if you are watching these things in order, it makes each class easier. For instance, today we are doing David Meach's, we're studying two of David Meach's publications, which are on leadership. Last week we did do probably his most well-known publication, which was on the alpha status, dominance, and division of labor in the wolf, which was in 1999. And these two, I have the links to them right over here that we're going to do. This lecture is on one he published in 2000 by himself, Leadership in Wolf, Canis Lupus, Pax. And the other one that is covered in this lecture is one that was published in 2002, which he did alongside Peterson, Jacobs, Drummer, and Smith. So what our objectives are today is, what is leadership in ethology? How does it relate to roles within the group? How does it relate to dominance? And most importantly is, how does this apply to professional dog trainers? So we're going to be focusing on mostly you understanding, right? This is ethology. So we are working on understanding the natural behavior of canines. So of course we go to their undomesticated versions. So even though we are not going to go completely into what is the best way to show leadership to dogs as a professional, as a dog owner, or how we teach it as a professional dog trainer, we're not going to go into the specifics to do that. We cover that later on, right? When we go into leadership, the leadership modules, how we actually apply this with pet dogs. But through ethology, when we understand the concepts, it's going to make it much easier for us to make the plans and to make your own plans and not have to mimic, right? Because there is so much confusion regarding leadership and dominance, and if it's even important for dog trainers. Is it a myth? You do not want to base your education on a collection of rhetoric, right? So even though I'm going to go over my own personal notes and what I find is important in these studies, anyone who is very serious about their education, read both of these. Read both of these for yourself, and I'll show you. They're not very long, right? I have them. You can download them right from the site. The 2000 study on leadership in a wolf. It's only a few pages, and it's really nice. He breaks it down into little sections, and that's it. That's just all references. I mean, this is the 2000 study right here. And then we have the, make that one small. And then you'll see the 2002 study. Same too. It's not that long at all. And it's pretty easy reading. Some publications that, scientific publications are not easy reading. These are very, very easy reading. And that's it. Then it gets to the reference portion. Now, first thing we're going to cover here is, what is leadership as defined from in ethology, right? So leadership is a real term that you're going to see written in publications by ethologists. So we want to get the definition that they basically all agree with. So we know that's what we're talking about here. And in this paper, in the 2000 paper by Mech, he refers back to even some of his old publications and the publications of other, where according to these studies, when we're talking about leadership, it's defined leadership among wolves is defined as the behavior of one wolf that obviously controls, governs, or directs the behavior of several others, such as when wolves decide on direction of travel, when to rest or travel, and whether to chase prey. So those are some examples there. So it's the decider. It's the decider of when things are going to happen. Now, how does it relate to roles within the group? So in the 2000 study, what he does is he breaks it down into little sections. Now remember, this isn't based off of like rhetoric or what someone read in some book. This is based off of knowledge from 1986 to 1999. All right. It was looking at records from 1986 to 1999. So that's a long time to see correlations, right? So you see correlations, and this is what Mech has found and some others in the second study that he did together. So first thing is awakening and initiating foraging. Key word here is initiating. You're going to see a lot of this is about initiating. A lot of times we think about leadership and dominance, which is going to be, it's two different concepts, right? A lot of rhetoric is just about being first, right? This has to do about being first and being the boss and doing stuff like that. It's not about that. A lot of it, dominance is, which this is not really what this is about. This is the leadership part. Dominance is simply the wolf, or really any animal for that matter, in ethology that has the first right or preference to any sort of limited resource. And that's like the simple definition of dominance. And we're normally, if we refer back to the study before this, is when we're talking about the dominant wolves in the pack, we're talking about the breeding pair usually. So we're usually just talking about the breeding pair, but the semantics are not going to be as important as understanding these behaviors. Now, keywords over here is initiating. This is going to be very, very important when I give you a little teasers about how this is going to apply to work into the domesticated version of the wolf. It's a lot of this is really about initiating and deciding. So here, what he writes about awakening and initiating is in foraging. He says generally pack members awaited the awakening of their parents before becoming very active. Although sometimes their activity would awaken the parents, nevertheless, it was not until the parents were awake and active that much of the socializing went on. So this is in there. This is something that is seen in their natural state. All right. So what's cool about this, you'll see when we're helping pet owners, when we go with Mother Nature and we're doing things like housebreaking schedules and all sorts of things like that, it's actually very natural for puppies, for example, to wait until their parents are active. All right, their parents or pack leaders or the dominant ones in the pack, however you want to call it, is we're looking at something that is natural. And you will tend to see problems when we go against Mother Nature, and training plans are based off of mostly waiting for puppies to take initiative. Even with things with going out in the morning and going to potty and being fed and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. There's going to be a common theme over here that is true in Mother Nature. Next is traveling. Traveling too. I put a little note here that it's not necessarily about being first. So what I highlighted over here is wolves is, yeah, it's, we think of like travel and you have to go first, and pet people and a lot of dog trainers will talk about, oh, it's very important when you're walking with your dog that you walk first so you can be the pack leader, you go through doors first so you can be the pack leader. You're going to hear a lot about this. You have to be first. Now, even though choosing the way and walking first, at certain times is correlated with leadership, it was not really about, in in a natural state, it's not really about physically being first. All right. Sometimes it's convenient for the dominant individuals or the parents to be first, but it's really about being deciding. All right, deciding which way you're going. So this is the little section I took out of here. So discerning a leader during travel can be complicated by such issues as youthful exuberance and estrus that may cause individuals that might not be directing the overall activity to sometimes surge to the head of the line of traveling wolves. Wolves often follow riverbeds, game trails, and old roads. When doing so, it is obvious where the pack is headed for certain stretches. So any wolf may forge ahead temporarily. So this is true. We can totally relate this. If anyone ever cuts their dog off the leash and they go hiking and stuff like this, some of it's going to be very natural and almost common sense when you think about it, right? If you're not have a dog hooked onto a leash, which is obviously very unnatural, and you're hanging out with your dog and you're traveling, you don't necessarily have to be in the front, right? Generally, a dog, if you have a good relationship, is aware of where you are, know which direction you are going, and then if you change direction, they're still going to go with you. So, okay, this is something too that's just confirmed and observed in the natural state. So we have reference material over here. I just have more notes on this. It's just everything was quantified, right? He was actually counting these things, all right? So on 70 occasions, 46 times was the male, and 27 times was the female. And you're definitely going to see in these studies, similar to what we went over in the last lecture, is it's a joint effort. That it is a joint effort between the breeding pair when it comes to leadership. Even though generally in most circumstances the female is submissive to the male, they generally lead all of the rest of the pack together, and all the rest of the pack submits to them. So again, how this helps and relates when we're dealing with clients and their dogs and going with Mother Nature. I don't know how often that I've heard pet people say things like, oh, well, my dog is only going to listen to so and so because he sees that person as the alpha, as the alpha. So he's only going to listen to him. All right. It is natural for dogs to have canines to have more than one leader. You can have a husband and wife or any type of any pair of people or multiple people that can lead. They're not just gonna follow. It doesn't have to be like just one supreme leader, right? You can have multiple people over here. Hunting. During attacks on prey, it is the breeders that seem to initiate. Again, this is even before we get to the study on correlation between status and leadership. Even on this first study, it's just lots and lots of correlation between it's the leaders. The breeders is also just another name, right, for the dominant wolves in the pack, or the alphas, or whatever you want to call it, right? So the highest ranking, generally the parents, are the ones that seem to initiate when it's quantified and they put down the numbers and they record it on paper, that they are the deciders when things will happen. Another interesting thing that I found out in here is, which I thought was a pretty cool tidbit. I'll just read this whole section over here. During pack hunts of Arctic hares on Ellesmere Island, all pack members chased hares when they had an opportunity. However, during hare hunts that lasted hours and involved many hares, usually leverets, the breeding male more often ambushed and caught hares chased by the yearlings. In 1993, I watched him capture 4 leverets this way and relinquish them to the yearlings, where I only saw the breeding female catch 2 during the same time, and she tried to eat them herself. I found this interesting, this whole quote over here, because of how, again, that it's not about leadership, and dominance is not about doing things first, eating first, being the first one. Here, and pretty much all literature that I could find about the male wolf, which even the female, the breeding female is generally submissive to, is he's generally giving. He's controlling food, but he's often given food. He's given food that he captures a lot. He is not always eating first. And even the female, who tends to eat first more, a lot of this, it's the opinion that it may be because she does usually feed her puppies first, but when they're older, it's probably because she's preparing. She needs the nutrients herself to prepare for another litter. But it is very, very common for the leader or the most dominant pack member to be given things away. And this is kind of cool because this, even on a side note, this reminds me of like our domesticated versions and how we work so nicely with hunting dogs, right? So where we can have submissive dogs flush things for us, and then we're generally capturing them in different ways, either with nets or arrows, or modern times with gunpowder. But it's very cool to show how all this stuff sort of relates to each other over here. Whoops, what did I do over here? Okay, let's get back over here. Provisioning. Same thing. Provisioning is about giving food. So same thing. I won't read this whole thing over here, but it's about delivering food, capturing and delivering food. Again, part of the role of the dominant wolves is provisioning and giving and delivering. And here it says, right over here was kind of cool. It says, when the pack has no pups, when the male plays a major role in feeding the yearlings. Remember, these aren't puppies anymore. They're still young, but they're yearlings. I once watched a breeding pair leave 3 yearlings at their rendezvous site and travel 9.5 kilometers away, where the male then dug up muskox calf shoulder and delivered it to the breeding female. She consumed it and then returned to the yearlings, and then she regurgitated it for the yearlings. I found this kind of cool. This is of course about the provisioning and leading the provision of the pack. On a side note, one of the things, there's so many like cool things that we saw here. How some trainers will say, well, it's natural, right? It's natural. It's okay to leave your dog home sometimes because this can relate to being left in the den or something like that. I always like having references. And dogs, I've noticed, if you do a good job and you do provide for a dog otherwise for their basic needs, you do it for a reasonable amount of time, that it's kind of cool to have a reference that even beyond just being puppies, while they're still like sub adults or more juvenile, or young adults, however you want to consider a yearling, that it is still natural behavior for them to be able to temporarily be separated from their pack, and then have the leaders, which is what we we try to mimic with pet owners, be able to come back and provision and provide for them. So I really like having that reference there, which is cool. Um, Also, oh, I like this too because we see here I highlighted the dominate and the lead. I think I used this quote in last lecture too. It says socially the breeding pair dominate their offspring and lead their activities. Remember, these are two separate things. And although the breeding male appears socially dominant to the breeding female, he feeds the female while she nurses the pups and cooperates with her in their care and protection. As the pups age, the male seems more intent on feeding them than does the female, perhaps allowing the female to improve her nutritional conditions for the next litter, which is what I mentioned before. Next subject, protection. And I divided this really into kind of two things. One is this is has to do with protecting from a threat that was not necessarily competition. Um, in this case, it was, they recorded things like muskox or grizzly bears and things like that they're referring to in the studies. And again, this is about leadership. I like here where even though there might be some chaos when their den area is going to be threatened by another animal or perceived or something perceives the pack perceives something as a threat. Again, here he shows one incident of definitely the mother, the mother who was the breeding female, um, make calls and direct the rest of the pack, even the male, to follow her. Because let's just read this because I'm just gonna this is short enough. I'm gonna mess it up, right? After about 1 hour, during which the pack was unsuccessful in forcing the musk ox to leave, the breeding female began barking and bark howling. All pack members then followed her to the west of the den and musk ox, where they all sat or lay while the breeding female continued barking and bark howling. They were positioned about 5 meters apart. Well, basically, she moved the whole pack because they were surrounding the musk ox, and it seemed as if she realized the musk ox was just going to stand its ground and not move away while they were surrounding it. So they were definitely following her calls. I also highlighted over here in 5 similar incidences, the male acted more aggressively toward the musk ox one time, and neither male nor female paid the musk ox much attention in the other 4. With the disturbance by a strange human in 1996, a male responded most aggressively while the female led the packs away. So we're talking about leadership over here. So this is both the top ranking pack members generally work together to deal with protection of the pack, protection of the family, making decisions. Some of this will seem sort of like common sense that they would do that, right? But it's good to see it in writing, and we like to have reference. And this is going to relate to things when we are troubleshooting as professional dog trainers and we're dealing with dogs that are overly aggressive or causing a problem because they are being overly aggressive to visitors within the home or things that they perceive as threat. We need to make sure that the dogs recognize in a way that they understand that it's really not their duty. It's really not their duty to lead, that someone is willing to lead, right? And this does not have to do, if you try to just jump right to mechanical training and trying to change behaviors, you're fighting against Mother Nature. A lot of this communication that we're going to be given to dogs um, has to do with ethology and things that they understand. The other thing that I have over here is I wrote down is territorial aggression. So this territorial aggression, I put it sort of in a different category, but it's protection. Is that I found this interesting that because again, referring back to other streams, even to the stream on Schenkel when it comes to intolerance, territorial aggression remains to be one of the most intense, serious types of aggression um, that we deal with when working with canine. So here you see again when it comes to other wolves, that there's just much more intolerance, and a lot of the adult wolves get involved. Right here it says, I've watched breeding pairs of wolves on Ellesmere encounter alien wolves full time 4 times, and each time they pursued the stranger together and with apparently equal aggressiveness. After another such encounter, which I only observed the aftermath, the breeding pair and the breeding female's post reproductive mother were all bloody, indicating that they all anticipated an attack, which ended in the death of the alien wolf. All right, so know that's in there. All right, so um, much more aggressive towards competitors. All right, not just, we're talking about things that are just a threat. We will get more defensive behavior, which is, let's just, do what we have to get things out of here. Competitors, we often get much more of an intolerance where they're going to pursue and try to kill. Right, so that's in that study that I found that's interesting there. Now here, these are some quotes that I took. Now there's going to be a lot of overlap. This is the other study that Mech did with the other scientist, which is how leadership correlates with dominance and reproductive status in the gray wolves. So within this study, one, right in just the abstract, that gives you a lot of information, which I have here, and I highlighted a lot of the stuff, but I'm going to go over some more quotes over here. Again, it mostly reaffirms that dominant breeding pairs provided the most leadership, consistent with a trend in social mammals. So this is consistent in most social animals. Also, that breeding males and females led packs approximately equally. Again, important, right? We don't have to have this big head alpha in a family that you're dealing with. It's important to know that canines naturally will take direction from multiple leaders. Also, I highlighted, yes, initiating. I like this because we're talking about initiating. A lot of it's about leadership, is about initiated behavior. Newly initiated behaviors were prompted about 3 times more often by dominant breeders, and dominant breeding females initiated pack activities almost 4 times more often than subordinate breeding females. And we're gonna get into this. And leadership behavior was observed in subordinate breeding females and other individuals just prior to dispersal from their natal packs. All right, so I'm going to make sense of some of this over here. Is when it comes to, in this study, it is showing again that there is, it's pretty much like very clear and inarguable that dominance correlates with leadership. That generally, whoever are the dominant wolves in a group tend to also be the initiators in making the decisions. And through these, what you'll see when we go through some examples is that when they do find other wolves making initiative or a lot of initiative, generally they're on their way out. They're usually older ones that are about to disperse and make their own packs. Make their own packs when they're not in the mood, I guess, to follow anymore. That's natural behavior. This is good information because it will correlate through the course when we go into troubleshooting behavioral problems. So here goes some more details that I saw over here. All right. So, in the study, leadership bout was defined as a period when an individual wolf was identified at the head of the line during travel of pursuit of prey. A new bout began with a change in leading wolf or activity. Recorded for each bout were date, total duration, blah, 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 blah. That was, I don't know why I highlighted that. Sorry. In this, there was a bunch of things that initiated. Oh, I know why I highlighted that. Because it's a little bit vague. There's some things about leadership is they talked about physically being in the front. And they also talked about over here, highlighted this over here, is activity initiation. Activity initiation occurred when one wolf prompted the following: arousing the pack from rest, traveling after group rallies, chasing prey, changing direction during travel, or defending the pack from trespassing wolves. Non-frontal leadership occurred when a wolf not in the lead broke ranks and led the pack in a new direction or activity. So this is important. Okay, so again, read these yourself. Which I found cool about this is even though physically the dominant wolves were usually in the front when they were moving places, a lot of the reasons that were also mentioned in the study previous to this is it's not, there's different reasons why they may not physically be in the front, which include like, exuberant juveniles. Also the fact that there is snow, like heavy snow, where sometimes another one will lead and push through the snow, and the more dominant ones seem to fall backwards. Also, they have something called non-frontal leadership. Non-frontal leadership would be even if another wolf was in front physically, if a second wolf broke ranks from behind and changed direction, did the other wolves follow? And what they found is that even though they didn't see this happen that often, of the 15 times it was recorded, it was always done by the dominant wolves in the pack, except for there was one other wolf that they saw do this 3 times in the winter just prior to her being dispersed from the pack. And she was a non-dominant breeder, I believe. It was a big pack with multiple breeders, and she eventually, soon after that, she dispersed and made her own pack. So again, for those of you who like to go hiking with your dogs and things like that, and this is something that I've always just noticed naturally, right? Go hiking with the dog. I change direction. The dogs generally change with me, even if they're in front of me or something like that. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. And, this study was, since a lot of this was about breeding status too, and larger packs, that's why that was in there too. That you would see some leadership by some other wolves, but it was strong indicator that it mostly correlated with who was the most dominant in the pack. And when you saw changes in that, it usually had to do with a wolf that was getting ready to disperse. So the conclusion about dominance and leadership correlation was, in this study, was basically the strongest predictor of leadership in the study was high social rank. All right, and the rest of you guys could read on your own. It's not going to read the whole study for you. And I also liked this in this study, which was very relevant, was suggestion makers versus deciders. That this was at the end of that study, which they say, we caution against attaching undue significance to our observation that subordinate wolves sometimes led packs, even though the subtle social interactions involved in travel coordination are difficult to observe. We found that dominant breeding wolves often made decisions that affected the pack's direction, even when not in the lead, meaning physical lead. It is common in social species for subordinate individuals to closely monitor dominant leaders. So it is necessary to distinguish decision makers, the true leaders, from initiators who merely suggest a direction. So how does this information about published leadership dominance observation help professional dog trainers, which I want to talk about? First thing I want to talk about is just this last paragraph that I read, which is, again, this last paragraph I like because we don't have to be like so anal about certain things. Like, yes, when we start making our plans of how to raise a puppy or how to help someone even with an adult dog to lead and have the dog follow, it's not necessary to never take like a suggestion from a dog, right? We have a dog that has the runs and it's crying by the door and we're saying, oh, but you're not on schedule and I didn't tell you it's time to go out, right? It doesn't mean if you take a dog's suggestion that suddenly you're not the leader anymore, right? That doesn't happen. Or we're training a dog, and this explains why, we're training a tracking dog, and we're going to have that dog be out front. Sometimes we're going to take a dog's suggestion, and and but just because we or another dog is the leader, and we try to teach an owner how to lead with their dogs, it is not about cut and dry and being first and not taking suggestions. You can relate this to humans, right? If parents, son or daughter says, "Hey, can we go to the movies this weekend?" And a parent says, "Yes, we can go to the movies." They did not the 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 child did not is now not the dominant one in the household, or the leader or head of the household. It's okay to take suggestions, right? It's okay to take suggestions. It's about the big picture. So that's going to be important. It helps us to be cynopraxis, which we learned about. All those good things. I put some notes here. These are like teasers before later on when we go into help and make plans for pet owners. And this is going to make it so easy for us just to understand why we do things. And I put a summary here, right? So yes, dominant, a reminder that dominance is control over limited resources. So it's going to really make sense when we go into plans and we're doing things like providing, yet controlling things that are limited resources to the dog, like controlling the food, controlling the toys, controlling the resting places, yet providing, right? The leaders, the dominant ones provide. They make sure no one is without, all right? So I'm not talking about deprivation here. This is just teasers. And then leadership, which this lecture is about making decisions for the group. So this is really, really going to help us when it comes to micromanaging our dogs for the better, like letting them know that when it's time to go outside, put them on the schedule, telling them when it's time to play, telling them when it's time to eat, telling them when it's time to get their affection and do activities and things like that. A lot of it is going to be, we're going to be the decision makers. And if we don't understand ethology and their natural behavior, we do not want the dogs to get mixed signals, right? If we raise a dog and we're just waiting on the cues and suggestions all the time from the dog, telling them when they're hungry, when they want to play, when they want to go outside, we can cause problems. And you will see when we move on and we're troubleshooting things like different aggression issues and conflicts that dogs have, not only with each other, but with us. A lot of times it's going to relate to them being confused about this stuff. And we don't want them to be conflicted. We don't want them to be confused. And also a reminder is that it's okay. You don't have to choose a pack leader of a human family. Dogs are designed to follow multiple leaders. Next, go at Mother Nature. Go at Mother Nature. Okay, this is going to be a reminder when we make our plans based off Mother Nature. I am not just saying this in theory because it makes sense on paper. I am telling you this because I have seen this work, all right? Not only is this the advice that I've been giving people for well over 2 decades, I have seen lots of other trainers go with Mother Nature, and it's just easier, it's smoother, it's less stressful for everyone. No one has to do any weird rules with their dogs. It is actually easy for the dog and the humans. Also, yes, be in control of limited resources, which I talked about, right? It has a trickle down effect to reduce conflict. If we look at all the Mech studies, being in control of limited resources, and there's more. We're going to go into this more about reduction of conflict and aggression within the lower ranks of a pack. There's almost none. There's almost no conflict in a good, stable pack of canines, mostly because there is nothing to have conflict over, right? The dominant ones are in control of limited resources, and they provide the limited resources, and no one else has to battle over it. And that's what dominance is about. Remember, dominance is not a training method. It's not about being the boss or being rough. It's just specifically about being in control of the limited resources and being clear to reduce conflict and to reduce aggression. And next, yeah, again, leadership dominance sets the stage for a more natural way to guide dogs and train obedience with less conflict and opposition. It is there to make things easier for us, for trainers. And one more reminder is of what is not important: being first. All right. Being first, going outdoors first, eating first, walking ahead first. When we go into obedience and doing things like heeling and having the dog walk behind us, that's mostly for management, to make things easier and to help us manage the situation and to set the dog up for success, right? That's not necessarily about ethology, or not necessarily. You can have someone who hardly ever has their dog on a leash. Take a member like Dave. He puts his, mostly if I see his dog on a leash, not on a leash, I see them more on carts pulling him. All right, they're out front. It does not mean that his dogs are leaders, right? That he's still leading in other ways. He's still deciding where they're going to go, where they're going to take the cart, right? It's not about being first, right? It's almost, leadership and dominance has very little about being first, besides the control, all right? The control of a limited resource, but that control of the lead and resource has just much to do about deciding who's going to have that resource first, as deciding that they're going to have it first, all right? So, but first is not a synonym for being a leader or dominant, okay? So I'm going to end this lecture here. That was what I wanted you to know. And I will be back Wednesday for Q&A on this. And it looks like we have, I see all kinds of good stuff in the pack howl for, Art saying, yep, lots and lots of good stuff here. Yes, and we are going to go into Art's mentioned stuff, Coppinger's books and Village Dogs. We are going to go into the undomesticated versions, right? So we have wild, we have the wolf, but then we actually have domesticated dogs living wild. What happens? Domesticated dogs living wild and domesticated dogs living with us, right? We got to see what's different, what relates, but you want to know the blueprint first before we want to understand that and the differences and why it may or may not be important to us as a professional dog trainers. We want to start with these raw blueprints first. All right. So thank you, everyone, and I'll be back soon.